Hello everyone! Today I want to film my foundation routine for you. Finally! I've tried this a couple of times and it always ended up being a bit of a mess because I forget to say one thing that's really important and then I will get really angry at myself for forgetting it. So today I have a checklist of points that I would like to address when it comes to an entire foundation routine. So the first thing I want to talk about is skin preparation. Now, skincare is probably the most important step of your foundation routine. So before you even go to apply foundation, make sure that your skin is, cleansed and moisturized. Do what suits your skin, what works for you. As for myself, I've cleansed my face in the morning with a toner and then I put on moisturizer, and now it has had time to sink in a bit and feels all right. I don't like my moisturizer at the moment, but that's a personal issue. If your skincare is right for your skin, you probably won't need primer. Now, there are different kinds of primer, and I have to admit that I'm not a primer expert because I've tried several, moisturizing primers as well as mattifying primers, pore filling primers, all of that. And I haven't really liked any of them. I tend to like the moisturizing primers because they give a nice supple feel to the skin, but pore filling and mattifying primers don't do anything in my experience. Maybe I've just not tried the good ones. I don't know, but that's just the experience that I have. So if they work for you, if you swear by them, please go ahead and continue using them, but that's just my personal take on them. Next, shade matching of foundation. Now, I would recommend that when you go and look for a foundation, match it to an area of your face that is the most even, that has the least amount of, discoloration, redness, blemishes whatsoever. That might be, for some people, the forehead. For example, on me, my forehead is pretty even. I would probably match it to this area. That might be your jawline, that might be your periphery of the face. So the point is to not get distracted by redness from blemishes, because you don't want to match your foundation to the redness that you're actually trying to conceal. So yeah, match it to an area that is the most even. And as for matching to face or neck, I would say it really depends. For myself, my skin is pretty even toned all over my body. My face tends to be a tiny bit darker, so I actually like to match to my neck, or well, this is the foundation that I'm going to use, and it's a pretty good match overall. It's very light, and so I match to my neck, and then if I feel like I need to add a bit more color, I would just go in with a bit of bronzer. That's that. Yeah, if you've swatched a foundation on your face or on your arms or wherever, I would recommend that you swatch somewhere on your face, just a tiny bit, apply with your finger, and then go outside into daylight and see if the color is right. Bring a mirror and check outside, not in direct sunlight because that's usually too bright and you won't see the different nuances in color as well. But in indirect daylight, such as in this room, for example, right now, where it's noon outside, so I have indirect daylight. That's pretty much the perfect situation in which to shade match. And next step, that would be where to apply foundation and how much, but I'm just going to explain as I go along. So I have my metal palette here. This one is from Kryolan, and I'm going to work from that. So I'm just taking my foundation, just shake it up a bit, and I'm not going to use much. I'm actually going to show you how little I'm going to use. So yeah, that seems about right. Maybe a bit more, but I'm probably not going to use all of it even. So it's a very small amount. And then I like to go in with my foundation brush. This is the one that I like to use at the moment. It's actually a blush brush, officially, from Real Techniques. It might have been limited edition. It's a bit firmer, but still fluffy and flat. So it really helps to blend the product. Now I'm just going to take a bit of that on the tip of my brush. Make sure that it's spread out evenly, the bristles at the top. And then I start applying at the center of the face, moving my way towards the periphery, because I have the most redness in the center of my face and not really anything to cover in the periphery, so I don't bother with that. However, if you have like breakouts in your jawline, that can sometimes happen if you're with acne prone skin, then you might want to start applying there. Basically, the idea is to get the most coverage where you need it, the most product where you actually need it, and then spread it out towards the areas where you don't really need any coverage at all. I have a mirror right down here, so I'm just making sure that that's blended nicely. I'm going to do one side of my face first so you can see the difference. Just grabbing a tiny bit more and put that on my forehead. Again, I'm starting at the center of the forehead because that's where I tend to get a bit red, just from moving my face basically. And blend outwards towards my hairline. Make sure to get in between the brows. And it's important that you work the foundation in from different directions so that you really work it into your pores and it doesn't sit on top. So that's one side of the face done. You can see it's already taken out most of the redness here, and it's already covered up a tiny bit of my under eye bags, even though I haven't actually taken extra product up there. That kind of depends on the extent to which a person has under eye bags. If they go down very far and if they're really intense, then I might go over them with a tiny bit of foundation to begin with and just add concealer or color corrector afterwards. So that's a nice even layer of foundation all over, and since we've sheared the product out towards the periphery, we don't end up with a line here on the jawline. So I'm just going to do the other side as well. Today the foundation sits really nicely. The other day when I tried filming this video, it looked horrible and I don't know why. So, oh, by the way, I don't think I've mentioned the foundation that I'm using is the HD Liquid Coverage by CATRICE. It's actually my personal favorite. Looks really nice on my skin. Now, when I apply foundation, I don't bother covering up every single blemish or under eye circles with the foundation. That's what the concealer is for. The foundation is just so that we get a very nice and even hue to the skin, just a very even complexion. And then we go in with the concealer for pinpoint concealing and correcting. I also try to carve out the top of the brow a tiny bit with the brush, That's that. Next step I'm going to do is eyeshadow primer. The one that I'm using, I'm just trying this out. It's a very cheap one from the drugstore because the one that I used to love these past 2 years or so has failed me these past couple of times I've tried it, so just trying out new things. This one is by Ashy and it's an eyeshadow base. I tried it the other day and it worked nicely. The only problem is it's quite dark. Like, this is my foundation shade and this is the eyeshadow primer shade, so it's actually quite dark. Especially they only have that one tone, and yeah, it looks a bit dark on me, but it's very sheer, so we can work with it. Yeah, so I put a bit of that onto my palette, scooped it up with my middle fingers. I'm not trying to flip you off. That's the finger that I prefer using. And I'm just applying this evenly onto my eyelid from the lash line all the way up to the brow bone. Sort of a patting motion. And really make sure that you get all the way in there. Just as you would apply eye cream, basically. And whatever's left on my finger, there's a tiny bit left on the palette as well. I'm just going to scoop that up and take that underneath the bottom lash line. So I'm looking up. I'm really getting in there. And this will also help prevent mascara from smudging. Right, that's that. Next step will be concealer / color correcting. Now, a lot of people, when they hear color correcting, they think of bright green or, well, pastel green or red and orange, which these are color correcting shades that I hardly ever use, at least not by themselves. What I like to do with colors like this is I scoop up a tiny bit of them and mix them with the concealer shade that matches your skin. Because what will end up happening is we get a slightly corrective undertone in the concealer, and thereby we can use a very tiny and thin amount of product just on top of an area that we would like to cancel out. And all in all, it will give a very natural and even appearance to the skin. So what I mean by that, now this is my personal concealer palette that is matched to me. Just holding it next to my face so you can see the colors. So the top shade, as you may be able to see, is slightly more yellowish, more olive than my skin tone. This is something that I would use for redness. The middle shade is very peachy toned, and that's what I'm going to use for my dark under eye circles. And this shade right here is a very light, slightly rosy shade that I'm going to mix in with the other two if I want to create a highlighting effect. So I'm going to start out with the middle shade right now with the peach toned one and work on my under eyes. And I'm just using a flat concealer brush. So I'm just taking a tiny bit of that product. The product, by the way, is Dermacolor by Kryolan. That's an excellent multi-purpose product that I highly recommend you check out. So I'm going to apply this right in here where you can see the darkness coming through and blend downwards along the underside of my eye bags. Now, if I were to apply this shade to the rest of my face, where I don't have that greenish, bluish undertone, it will just come off as orange. But since we have that cool tone underneath, it will look just like my skin tone. So I place it quite precisely where I want the color correcting, and then I'm just going to pat this in with the tip of my finger so it melts into my skin. Just a tiny bit more in here. Right, just like that. Hope you can see the difference. Hold on. That's better. So here you can still see the darkness coming through, and here it's corrected. Just grabbing some kitchen paper to wipe off my brush in between, because I'm not going to go into the highlighting shade. And I'm just taking a tiny bit of that again on my concealer brush, and I'm working that right in the crevice on the underside of my eye bag to sort of highlight that indentation there. And again, I'm going to blend this in with my finger. Hopefully you will be able to see what I've achieved. Yes. So when I look straight ahead in the camera, this area is just brightened up a tiny bit, so it flattens out that area. Now my skin is still a bit dewy, but after we've powdered, this will look very flat and depuffed and very fresh. Just using whatever's left on my brush to sort of blend in the edges of that peachy corrective shade here. Not taking up any extra product, and just barely touching the skin. I'm really just gently dabbing this onto my skin and dabbing in with my finger again. I'm also going to use that highlighter shade on any areas that kind of made my face droop a bit. So I'm going to use it in this area right here, from my nostril going downwards. I'm just going to place it so that you can see it before I start blending it out. And I also like to put it here underneath the outer corner of my mouth. So we're going to brighten and highlight every area where there's shadow dragging the face down. Now the reason why, in my opinion, it's important to get a shade that has more pinkish undertone for that purpose. And I'm talking about lighter skin tones as of now. On darker skin, you would want something that's a bit more leaning towards orange, because shadows have an ashy tone. So you're going to use a shade that first of all is lighter than your skin tone, and second of all has some warmth to it, some redness, some orange, to counteract that ashy tone of a shadow, if that makes any sense at all. And now I'm just going to pat that in with my finger again, so that there are no edges, so that you can't see where that color and that product begins and where it ends. Yeah, I think you can see the difference. This is just a bit more brighter, that side of the face, whereas this still shows that I'm getting old. Just going to cover up that scar out here, because I want to start powdering this side of the face so you can really see the difference. The powder that I'm going to use is the translucent powder from Kryolan in the shade TL2, and it's a slightly yellowish tone that I like to use on very pale skin, because it also helps with redness. For powder, I like to use smaller brushes because I can be very precise with them. So I'm going to use this one because I can really get in here because this is the area that personally I like to start applying powder in. And I just dab it on this area because that's where we applied the concealer, and we want this area to be we want it to be really set. So as you can see now, this side of the face looks much flatter, less puffy and all of that. And I'm also going to apply most of the powder around my nostril. And in the outer corner of my mouth. Basically everywhere that we applied the concealer. And just with a very light hand, starting at the center of the forehead and blending outwards, I'm also going to set my forehead. I would suggest that when setting the face, start out with a little bit of product, let it set, you know, do bronzer and all of that in between. And if you feel that at the end of doing your makeup you need a bit more, you can go in with the powder again, but just give it some time to set, because you don't want to over powder. That's going to look really obvious. And our goal here, I'm also going to dab a tiny bit of powder over my eyelids. The goal with this foundation technique is to have the skin look super healthy and even, but not fake. This is going to look like skin when we're done with everything. So I think you can see the difference pretty well now that we've cancelled out all of these shadows facing downwards. All right, I'm just going to do the same on the other side, and then we're going to move on to bronzer. Again, I'm going to go in with my peachy tone and start. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to look in here, I know, but I keep checking the monitor to see if I'm in the frame. Rookie mistake. So I'm using the peachy tone in here and down that crevice. Basically everywhere you see some, you know, bluish, greenish, ashy tones peek through. And also something that a lot of clients mention, a problem that a lot of people seem to have is that they say they apply concealer and then all of their wrinkles show up more, which is true because your skin is transparent basically. Like the top layers of your skin are completely transparent. They might have some tint to them, you know, but the skin itself is transparent. So as soon as you layer a product on top of that is not transparent, it will reflect the light differently, and it can really show off any wrinkles that you have. To some extent, that's just a compromise that you have to take. But you can minimize the problem a tiny bit if you, for example, as you may have noticed, we applied the concealer only in the center part of the face, which is where we usually don't have those fine wrinkles. Most of the wrinkles will appear next to our eye, and that's actually not where we applied any product. So this area is more or less completely free of product. Now, if you have a lot of discoloration in that area, it just can't be helped. If you want to cover that up, you're going to notice the wrinkles a bit more, maybe. But the discoloration will be gone. So that's what I mean by compromise. We can help that a bit by just using the product anywhere you have discoloration and leaving the areas that are even and that are nice on the skin, just leaving that free of product or just using a very, very light hand. But yeah, it's just something that you have to accept to some extent. But if you don't apply a lot of product all the way around your eye socket, it's at least not as noticeable. So again, I'm going in with the highlighter shade. I'm just working that into the crevice here. And here. And here. Just checking if I have any redness anywhere else or something. Yeah, there's a tiny spot actually right here. I used a tiny bit of that more olive shade now. Can you see? Yeah, that one. Because there's a bit of redness here. And I'm just gonna let that sit for a moment before I start working it in. Now I tend to powder my face because my skin is very shiny, especially on camera it looks very shiny. And I don't mind glow, but yeah, just the texture of my skin is just shiny. I don't know, it just is. Even though it's been quite dry these past months. Just checking if that's blended in evenly. I think I need to get the brush out a bit more and just work in those edges. So yeah, I like to powder a tiny bit all over, but if you have super dry skin, if you feel like after applying the foundation, if you even have trouble blending the foundation in because your skin is so dry, first of all you might want to use a moisturizing primer before to help with the blending. And also in that case you might not even need to powder at all. I would still recommend a tiny bit of powder in that area right here because it will help with the under eye bags. There. Do you see that? It's magical. But yeah, as for the rest of the face, you might not have to powder the forehead, for example, or your cheeks. Or just, you might just get away with using what's ever left on the brush. Before I powder my eyelids, I'm just going to make sure that there's no creasing from the eye base. That's that. Now, you may be thinking or not that I've already powdered this side and now I put cream on top of that. What's the deal? Because there's this rumor that you can't apply creams or liquids on top of powder, which is BS. You just have to be careful when working it in. If you put cream or liquid on top of powder, you don't want to wipe it on because that will definitely dissolve and disrupt what's underneath. But if you just tap it in, it's totally fine. It's not going to be a huge problem. Just be sure that how you work it in is very gentle and don't rub. Right, next thing is shading. Now shading is a very broad term, and for me it consists of contour, bronzer, highlighter and blush. So I'm going to address these 4 points. Now, I'm just going to show you. I don't usually contour on myself because I feel like I don't really need it. But for the sake of this video, I am going to. So I'm going to start out with the contour. I'm using this one. I think this is a discontinued product by CATRICE. It's the Prime and Fine lighter contouring palette. And I'm using, yeah, let's just use this. I'm going to use this brush for bronzer as well later on. So basically contour goes right underneath your cheekbone. So if you roll the brush down, just where it then pushes in, that's where you want to apply the contour. Right on top of that, like right where that bone, that cheekbone protrudes the most outwards, that's where you apply the bronzer. Also maybe a tiny bit on top of that. And blush, I start applying at the apples of the cheeks. I'm going to go into depth later on when we get to blush. And highlighter goes on top of that. It's kind of like the icing on the cake. So I'm going to start out with the contour. I'm using a fluffy angled brush for this. Just grabbing a bit of that product, making sure it's evenly distributed on the tip of the brush. And then I use the angled brush kind of like this. And I'm just going right underneath that cheekbone. And I'm not going straight down, I'm going more across, like towards the Cupid's bow almost. And it's a kind of a flicking motion, so I don't come in too far. And once most of the product is placed, yeah, you can see just a slight shadow here. Just going to build it up very slowly. Then I make sure to clean the brush off in between on kitchen paper, and I just start buffing the top edge. So when I turn to the side, it doesn't look like a stripe of product here, it's just a nice shadow. It's a little bit intense on camera, it's not as intense in real life. But to diminish that a bit, I'm going to blend it in with my foundation brush. I didn't pick up any more product on that, just what's left on the brush. And this is a great trick if you've gone overboard with contour, bronzer, blush. Right. Now, next step will be bronzer. And I'm using, sorry. Well, actually, I'm going to use this trio from Sleek. So I'm going to use the bronzer in here and the blusher and the highlighter as well later on. So I pick up some product of some of the bronzer on my brush, just tapping in there, tap off the excess, and now I put the brush right on top of that bone as it protrudes outwards. So it's right on top of the contour. And I'm actually going more across towards the cheek now with that. I mean, that kind of depends on your face shape. I have a more oval shaped face, and I personally like my face to look a bit wider and a bit rounder, so I put the products more like horizontal. And I'm going to blend upwards towards my temples. I'm picking up a bit more product. And then I'm also going to put this right on top of the brow bone, like right on top of the eyebrow, blending up towards the hairline and really blending this into my hairline so there's no gap, no flesh showing through. Now this also depends on your face shape. If you have a very narrow forehead, you might not want to put any product there at all, or maybe just on top of the eyebrow bone and not along the hairline or something like that. But since I have quite a large forehead, I like to do this just a bit more on the hairline because I like to narrow down my forehead a bit. I also like to take a bit of the bronzer across my nose. Just flick it on there. And I'm not going to go all the way down to the tip, just the bridge of my nose. So it ties in nicely with the rest of the contouring. Now, going back to the contouring, sorry I forgot earlier, but I'm also going to put this along the jawline, right on top of that bone. Just like that. So one side of the face I'm going to finish, and then I'm going to do the other side so you can see the difference. I'm going to move on to blush, and I'm just going to use the same brush again. So I'm using the blush in here. Again, just tapping into the product, tapping off the excess. And now, as for positioning of the blush, I go from my nostril, like right on the height of my nostril, outwards, and I stop underneath the outer half of my eye. That's where I start to apply the blush. Now, don't do this and apply the product, because what might happen, as soon as you relax your face, it might sag and drop down much further than you want it to be. So just with your face completely relaxed, put it right here. I'm using a light hand. I'm barely touching my skin. I'm really just very gently dabbing this on. So I start applying here, and I just blend it into the bronzer so that this area is just a bit more rosier than the outer part. And this blush has a nice sheen to it, which I really like, because it automatically gives a glow to the face. I just picked up a bit more of the product. And also the highlighter is going to melt into that shimmery blush nicely. I also blend it across the socket of the eye, just a tiny bit. There's no extra product on the brush, just whatever's left. Flick it on top of that. That's nice. Yeah, now I'm going to do the highlighter, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. So yeah, I'm actually going to use my finger, yes, so you can see. So I'm just picking up some of the highlighter on my finger. I like to use my ring finger for that. And I'm going to place it so you can really see it before I start blending it in. So I put this right where my cheekbone transitions into my eye socket. And I start here, just like underneath my eye here, and I blend downwards underneath my eye, like towards the apples of your cheeks, and upwards like a half moon shape. And you can go all the way underneath your eyebrow with this. So you can really see where I place the product, but I'm going to blend it in. And to blend it in, I'm just going to use a clean finger and like polish it down with circular motions. Just blend it in the surrounding area. So everything, I'm also going to blend it like here towards my hairline, so it catches the light nicely. And I'm also going to apply a tiny bit of highlighter down the bridge of my nose. Some people like to put it just on the tip of the nose or right between their brows. I personally, that works great if you have a rather flat face, like a rather flat bone structure, but I actually have quite my nose protrudes a lot, so I don't want it to protrude even more, so I just highlight the bridge of my nose a tiny bit, not going all the way down to the tip of the nose because I don't want to elongate it. I just wanted to catch the light a bit. And I'm also going to apply a bit on my Cupid's bow. Now, some people like to also take the highlighter like on the forehead and on the tip of the chin. I personally don't like to highlight there, but that really depends. It's personal preference. So I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to do that. I'm picking up my brush again, and I'm just going to do all of that on the other side. So starting out with the contour, that ashier tone. I'm going to show you the difference between those shades. So this is the bronzer shade and this is the contour shade. So you can see this one is much cooler toned. This one's a bit warmer. So we're starting out with the contour again. Just finding that spot right underneath the cheekbone and kind of angling it towards the Cupid's bow. And I'm being very gentle, I'm not pressing at all. And once most of the product is laid down, I just like to wipe off the brush and work it in and really blend the edges. Next I'm going to do the jawline before I forget again. Now if you have a very high forehead, you could also contour the top of the hairline with the contour. I personally use the bronzer for that purpose, but you could totally deepen that with the contour shade. So next will be bronzer. Just making sure that's even. Blending it in a bit with the foundation brush again. Going into the bronzer. And again, I'm placing this right on the bone where it protrudes outwards. And you may be able to see I'm using like a tapping motion. Now I'm just going on top of the eyebrow, up towards the hairline. Like that. I'm wiping off the brush again and I'm going to go into the blush. And again, from my nostril outwards, underneath the outer half of my eye. That's where I start dabbing on the blush, moving towards the cheekbone. And I'm just wiping the brush off, off in between. And with a clean brush, I make sure to blend all of this together. And now I'm going into the highlighter again with my finger. And right where the cheekbone transitions into the eye socket. But still not on top of the eye bags. That's very important, otherwise you'll make that area shiny again, which we just powdered down earlier. And make a half moon shade towards your brow bone. You don't have to go all the way up there, but for a very simple, pretty, everyday look, that's just a really nice method to create dimension and, freshness with very simple steps. And now with a clean finger, I'm just blending this in with circular motions. And on top of the cheekbone, I blend outwards towards the hairline. What I personally really hate is when you see a matte face and then just a strip of highlighter on your cheek that doesn't, where you can just see where the highlighter starts and where it ends, and I hate that. I want this to be very soft and ethereal and really just blend together. Right. yeah, that's it actually. That's the foundation routine. Just going to pose a bit for the camera. And I'm going to create a look using the same colors that we used for the face on my eye area, and you can see that in my next video. So be sure to check that out. Thank you for watching, and you'll see me in my next one. Bye!